My name is Erika Finanger. I'm a pediatric neurologist at Oregon Health and Sciences University. I've been here 10 years since I graduated my fellowship training. My job today is really to talk to you a little bit, I think, about what I do, how gene therapy is now a part of my my clinical care within my clinic, but also where we are going and the importance of moving this forward so that we can serve even more patients and offer therapies that are really very desperately needed, at least within my field and with all other fields of medicine. So I'm going to start off with one of the diseases I see most commonly. In fact, the most common disease in my clinic is Duchenne muscular dystrophy. This is the most common childhood muscular dystrophy, the second most common muscular dystrophy overall. It affects about 1 in 3,500 to 1 in 5,000 newborn males, which means there's about 500 new diagnoses in the United States per year. And here in Oregon, I would say I make about 5 diagnoses per year. So this is something certainly that is present in my clinic and affects many Oregonians and Southwest Washingtonians. Typically, children appear healthy at birth and do well in the first couple of years of life. And the diagnosis really isn't usually made until around age 3 to 5. Parents note that their children are having difficulty with frequent falls, difficulty getting up from the floor, and particularly as they get around more peers, they notice that they're not running or jumping as their peers are doing and come in for a diagnosis. Unfortunately, this is a very progressive disorder, and the muscles degenerate over time, leading to the loss of ambulation in adolescence, so typically between ages 9 and 12. And unfortunately, even with supportive care, these boys pass away in the 3rd decade, most typically. So this is a couple pictures of my patient, Joey, Amber's son. And Amber's here today to tell us a little bit about her experience with Duchenne, her experience with Joey, and just a little bit about Joey, because he's a delightful young man whom I've been lucky enough to get to know some.
As you see from these pictures, these pictures were taken actually about the time Joey was diagnosed. Joey was 4.5 when we found out he had Duchenne, and it was a life-altering experience, to say the least, and it has been since then. You know, as you can see, his smile it lights up a room. It just keeps you going, and to this day keeps me going. Back when he was first diagnosed, we were hopeful that, you know, all these therapies and everything were going to come about, and, you know, all we had was hope of the future. And when we still do, but back when you're first diagnosed, you have no idea what's going to happen, and you're just hopeful that they can stay as healthy and strong as possible. But with Duchenne, that is not the case. It is a progressive disease. The challenges we go through, and you see your son fighting for his life every single day, and crying. You know, there's those days where he's crying and saying, why does this have to be me? And it's hard as a parent to go through that. So anyway, the hope that we have for gene therapy and the up and coming therapies is all that we have. And I continue to hope and pray that something will at least slow this down, and I can keep my son the way he is right now in this you know, slide you see, this smiley boy, because I would be thrilled if I could just keep him where he is today instead of knowing what the outcome is.
Thank you, Amber. And I learned, and you can see in these pictures, that Joey loves to fish. He told me about his adventures this summer. As you can see, they've been to Mount Rushmore, and he is a joy, and I share Amber's hope for the future. My job today, I think, is to give a basic understanding of what gene therapy is. Again, everyone's heard of gene therapy, but I'm going to do my best to try to explain a little bit of what gene therapy is. When we think about gene therapy, it's fairly straightforward as far as what the idea is, right? There's a gene that's doing something it's not doing its job, or it's doing something it shouldn't be doing. And so basically we want to treat the disease at its cause. And so there are a number of ways, again, this is a simplification, but Mostly what I'm going to talk about today is the first step up there, which is replacing the bad gene. We know the gene that's causing the trouble. We're going to try to replace it with a gene that works. So if we think about giving a new gene, you can't just take a gene and give it to a person that doesn't exactly work. There is a lot of work done by the biotech and basic scientists to get this to actually be a reality. I am not a basic scientist. I'm a clinician who runs clinical gene therapy trials and then also has used this in her clinic. So if we think about it just generally, and I have some more scientific, a little bit more pictures later, but if you think about it, we have a healthy gene here. We want to introduce that into a person. And again, you can't just give the gene to a person. Viruses are very good at infecting cells, and we want to get our DNA of interest into a cell. And so we basically hijack a virus, put our DNA within that virus, the DNA of interest, and then use that virus to introduce it into a patient so that it can infect cells and therefore deliver the DNA to where we want it to go. So that's the general sort of idea of it. In 2016 in the US, we started to have approvals for therapies. So there are 6 approved therapies, that may be 7 now, between the European Union and the United States. There are more than 80 gene and cell therapy based programs under clinical development. So this is a very active, evolving field. In my clinic, I have 4 medications that have been approved in the last 4 years, which work by this mechanism, 3 for Duchenne and 1 for SMA. SMA is spinal muscular atrophy. It's another monogenetic disease that causes progressive muscle weakness, and unfortunately is the most common genetic cause of death in infancy. So this is an even more progressive, quicker disease that typically affects 1 in 6,000 births. Their progressive weakness progresses over months and typically leads to death within the first year of life, certainly within the first couple of years of life. So this is a quote shared from the first patient that I was able to treat with gene therapy here at OHSU, and I'm just going to read it for you. A quick Google search on diagnosis day told us that SMA type 1 is a progressive weakening of muscles, taking away the ability to walk, crawl, sit, and even eat, swallow, and breathe, resulting in life expectancy under 2 years, often far shorter. So again, this patient was diagnosed right around 6 months of age. I was able to treat him within a week after diagnosis and was, again, the first patient I had the opportunity to treat with gene therapy just 6 months ago. And this is what his mother told me yesterday when we talked. Because of gene therapy, our son Lincoln has gained the ability to laugh, babble, hold his head upright, and we believe someday soon sit unassisted. As we plan for his first birthday next month, a milestone that historically so many with SMA type 1 were not able to celebrate, we are excited to let him have a few licks of frosting and tastes of cake as he is no longer tube fed. None of the above would have been possible without gene therapy. We are so thankful Lincoln has proven Google wrong. And this is an adorable picture of young Mr. Lincoln, who is 11 months old here and will have his first birthday next month. So the first trial, or the trial that led to approval of this drug, again in May of 2019, was run at a single hospital in Ohio. There were 15 patients that participated in this trial. And what you first know is that all 15 of them are living at 20 months of age, which again, the average life expectancy of a child diagnosed with SMA type 1 is 8 months. So the fact that all of them are living at 20 months is certainly very, very encouraging. In addition, what we see is that they had significant improvement in their their motor function, with 11 of them being able to sit, which again is by definition, SMA type 1, you should never attain the ability to sit. And so most of the patients learned to sit, and 2 in fact walked, which is miraculous. Typically patients come to diagnosis around 4 to 6 months like Lincoln did. Like the other patients that I've treated with other approved therapies for SMA, the key would really be to treat these kids before they had weakness. When all of their spinal neuron cells are healthy or relatively healthy, so that I can make a bigger difference. And we need to be testing early. And so after approval of the first drug to treat spinal muscular atrophy, the US government recommended adding SMA screening to the newborn screening. And as you can see here, 32 states now actively screen for SMA, which would allow identification of these children before, again, they are weak. And we really hope that Oregon will be number 33 because the outcomes are really night and day different, and this is where we need to be for treatable diseases. In Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which we started with, just to bring us back for full circle, there are, that I know of, 3 pharmaceutical companies with active trials in Duchenne muscular dystrophy. As I explained, the gene therapy there is a little bit different because they needed to alter the basic gene. You can't give the entire human dystrophin gene back, it's too large. But 3 companies have figured out a way to shorten that gene to its essential portions, put it into a virus, and now it is in clinical trials in Duchenne muscular dystrophy. We hope to participate in those trials here at OHSU. I feel like I should knock on something. I have been able to treat all 3 patients whom I thought gene therapy was appropriate for. And actually, broadly speaking, I think that when families, we've sat down and made a decision, because sometimes there are choices. Broadly speaking, I've been able to treat each patient with their preferred therapy. That is not always easily attained, so it takes a long time. It takes a lot of telephone calls, a lot of letters, a lot of appeals. And some of the pharmaceutical companies have provided significant support as well, as far as providing medication if there's a gap in therapy or things like that, because it's important to treat these patients, as I tried to reiterate, as soon as possible. And so we can't talk for very long. We need to treat them once we've made the diagnosis. So I've had patients flying weekly from Colorado to get a therapy here as part of a clinical trial. We have patients coming down from Washington. These are very committed families who are really, really invested in finding something better. And so in speaking for Joey and for the patients more broadly with Duchenne and with all the other diseases that we care for, that this is an urgent need. It's very exciting that we have approvals, but there is a very large unmet need that hopefully will continue to move forward with these kinds of trials and innovations.
We're still constantly learning more and more about the disease and about the new therapies that are up and coming. And I just, like Dr. Finanger said, the time is now. These boys are getting weaker and weaker by the day, and any up and coming trials or any gene therapies or any new technology, anything to help these boys now is what we need. So I thank you.